Hey everyone, I'm over here in the CompTIA Network Plus training labs, and what I'm doing today is I'm doing some basic tests with Wireshark and different commands as far as ping, DNS, query, SSH, and HTTP, and then filtering that traffic to look at that, how that works over the wire and what we want to search for to filter for that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start our packet capture on that Ethernet adapter. And then we're going to ping over to our domain controller there on the far left, which is 192.168.0.1. So after we generate that traffic, we can go ahead and stop our Wireshark, and then we can filter for that traffic by typing icmp. So what's that is going to show us is it's going to show us the machine that we're coming from, which is this dot .3 going over to the dot .1. And then we can also see different things like the MAC address from our machine that we're on, and then the MAC address over on that other machine that we're pinging to. One of the other things that you can do with this is you can type things like frame contains, and say you just wanted one way to be able to look at that traffic going to that adapter is just typing in like the first few addresses, and then that's going to filter for any of the MAC address that any of the packets that contain that frame as far as this adapter, which is going to basically be all of them. But if you just wanted to filter for any specific one, you can also filter for that through a frame contains. That's be one way of looking at that as well. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and quit our Wireshark, and then we're going to start up, and then we're going to run a DNS query to our host. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do an NS lookup, and we're going to do an NS lookup on this host here from our Windows 11 system. So let's go ahead and start a new packet capture, and then let's just go ahead and type NS lookup, and then the name of that server, which is ACID C01. So that's going to do a lookup on that server there, and then it's going to resolve that host name to the IP address. So after we do that, we can stop our capture, and then we can filter by DNS. And there we have the traffic for that DNS query as far as looking up the host name. And you see that host name here and the traffic as far as that, what we looked up for that host name. And DNS operates at layer 7 of the OSI model. That's probably pretty self-explanatory, the application layer. And then also we can see that it's operating over port 53, which is what DNS uses to resolve those host names. So those are a few interesting things that we can see with a DNS capture. As we can see the host port that is being used by DNS, and then we can see the name of the server that we queried there with the AAA record, or the quadruple A record. So that's one of the things, and then the A record is the basic IPv4 record. So those are two things that we can see there. And if we were to go into our DNS on this server here, we could look that up, and then the DNS information that was be show those records and the DNS tables. So those are a few interesting things that we take a look at there. So one of the things that you can do if you wanted to say just filter, you can do a control F, and then you can search by strings as well. So say you wanted to just look for anything in this packet capture that contain that host name. So you could just type that, and then you're going to find these host names in here. So that's something that you might find helpful as far as trying to isolate traffic or find specific packets that you're looking to analyze. So those are a few things that are good to know there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do an SSH connection. So let's go ahead and start another Wireshark here. And we're going to go ahead and run SSH from our PowerShell. They might be able to do it from here too. I don't know if this SSH is normally built in on Windows. I don't believe it is. I might have to install that service separately, but on this particular lab, it's already installed. So we're going to connect. First, we're going to start a new Wireshark. And then we're going to run our SSH command, and we're going to connect, I believe, to this PF sense server over here, our .5. So that's going to be 192.168.0.5. So that's going to ask us for the fingerprint, and then we're going to go ahead and type yes. And then we're going to type that password. And since this is encrypted, one of the things we wouldn't be able to find is this password we're typing in here, because SSH is secure. So essentially, none of that data could be apprehended or deciphered through a packet capture because it's not plain text when you're using SSH. So those are a few things to make note of there. And then one of the other things we can do once we've done that is we can drop to our shell here, and then we can see what we're on as far as the Linux version and whatnot. So this is PF Sense Firewall, and after we've done that, we can go ahead and stop this, and then we can filter by just the SSH, and then we can see all that traffic as far as the traffic that was generated from this one, and then we can see that client key exchange as well, which is interesting because once we were prompted to accept that certificate, that is what the client key exchange has to do with. I actually have another video that goes over TLS cipher suite negotiations when connecting to websites that you might find helpful. And that really breaks down how the cipher suites exchange keys when you connect to a web server. So there's a few interesting things to note there as far as checking all of the different things for the SSH traffic and the cipher suite that was used, the elliptical curve, for when we connected to that with the certificate keys. So there's a few interesting things to note there. One of the things that you can actually see on the cipher suites in our SSH session here is you can type open SSL and then ciphers dash V, and that's going to show you all of the cipher suites. I don't know if that's actually used in the client certificate negotiation when we connected to this, but this is more or less used for when you're connecting to web pages. And like I mentioned, how the TLS negotiations work between a web server and your local client as it connects from the client to, say, a web server or something. So those are a few interesting things to notate there as far as that traffic. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start another Wireshark, and then we're going to do some some HTTP traffic. So let's go ahead and start another Wireshark. And next we're going to basically connect to this Alma, um, this server here, which is a Linux server. And this is running a basic Apache web server. Let's see if the default password works here. So this is running Almana Linux, and basically it's running an Apache web server. So what we're going to do is we're going to capture some traffic once again from our Wireshark when we connect to that server, which is going to be our .4 server. Um, Actually, yeah, that's a .4. So we're going to start another Wireshark capture here, and then we're going to go ahead and start a browser. And let's go ahead and connect over to our Almana server there, 168.0.4. And then that's going to bring up a basic uh, information pertaining to the web server as far as that web server's HTTP service or Apache web service that is running over here on this. A few things you can do to check for that as far as seeing if the Apache is running. You can basically just go down to here. Let's see how they got this set up on this system. Yeah, it's activities, and then scroll down, and then we can bring up our terminal, and after that comes up, we can check the SSH information. So one of the things you can do to see the Apache web server that's running on this is you can run commands that are going to show us which version of Apache is running on this. So that would be one way to see the Apache version that's running on that HTTPS or HTTPD-V should show the same thing. And then -S is going to show the configuration as far as how this Apache web server is set up. But I don't want to go too off topic here because that's just some other things that are interesting in regards to checking the Apache server. You could also basically bring up the same thing here if we just brought up the browser down here at the bottom and then we just type our local host. It's going to bring up the same thing that we did when we connected to it from this Windows 11 server. And then it's just going to show that splash screen that's basically being served through this root file here is where I believe the HTML resides. So if we type localhost, that's just going to bring up the same thing that we got from our Windows 11 over here. So after that, we can go back and then we can essentially look at that traffic in Wireshark that we generated through the HTTP request to our Almana server. So let's go ahead and stop this. And then we're just going to type HTTP. Essentially, that's going to allow us to see what type of traffic was generated from this server over to our uh, Omna web server. And then if you wanted to filter for that, I believe that would be IP address equals, and then we could just type .3, 192.168.0.3, it's actually .4. And then that's just going to show our traffic that's going that we generated when we made that HTTP request. And then you're going to see things in there as far as how that web server served that web page and some of the files associated with that as well. So for instance, you could see that icons powered PNG file there. So that would be one of the things that you could get with a command if you were to run like a wget um, from a Linux server over to that one. You could possibly pull down that file right there. So those are a few things to notate as far as being able to filter for the IP traffic or the HTTP traffic, and that is plain text, so it's not HTTPS. So if you were to enter any sort of credentials or anything when connecting to that server, you would be able to find it in here. And one of the things, as I'd mentioned previously, you could do a control F and a string, and then you could type like password, pass, or something else that if you were to intercept a password over the plain text, you could easily be able to see it within this traffic. So those are a few things to notate there. A couple other things I was going to mention is essentially you can filter for different types of traffic just based off of the different requests that you're making. Um, so those are a few good things to know as far as some basic Wireshark filtering based off of different services that we had done over the wire here. So hopefully you found that helpful in your pursuit, and thanks for stopping by and have a great day.